We are through 1 week of NFL action, and oh my goodness, did we have some breakout performances. Week 1's supposed to be crazy, but this was just a little extra special. And when looking at standout talent, there is some eye-popping information that reveals that some of these guys could keep up these performances and that it wasn't just one lucky outing. We'll start with Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I don't want to pull an I told you so, but we projected that Brandon Ayuk would be making a move to become the number 1 option in San Francisco after he broke the 1,000-yard barrier last year, as Debo has been losing some of his fantasy upside with Christian McCaffrey now in a San Francisco jersey. Well, 8 catches, 129 yards, and a pair of touchdowns later, and I am grinning eye to eye knowing that a lot of you got Ayuk at an extremely fair discount. We're talking in the 4th or 5th round for him to break out against this Steelers secondary. He cooked Pittsburgh's cover 4 coverage while getting 4.1 yards of separation upon the pass being released on his first touchdown. He also led the team in targets with 8 of them, and he played in 87% of snaps, so around his usual usage. But what we saw with him was a lot of 2-back sets where teams had to respect Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Juszczyk, and Deebo Samuel in the run game, and it left little to no front-end help. Basically, Ayuk was having a lot of fun out there because the run game is so phenomenal in San Fran. Kenneth Gainwell is up next, and while he didn't have an eye-popping day on a surface-level look at his stats, his usage situation confirmed what we heard out of training camp, at least for now. There were reports that despite the recent acquisitions of DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, both historically efficient but injury-prone backs, that Kenneth Gainwell was getting the majority of first-team snaps in practice. Penny was a healthy scratch, and Swift was put in for just 29% of snaps on possibly a snap limit for week 1. But Gainwell, he had 14 touches on the ground and 4 through the air. And look, I want you to be prepared for an ever-rotating backfield since that's the way this situation was pitched in the offseason in Philadelphia. However, Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift are 2 of the most injury-prone backs in the league. Much like those of you who took Gus Edwards a week early before J.K. Dobbins went down in Baltimore, it also may not be a bad idea to have this guy and Kenneth Gainwell on your last roster spot, or maybe even higher than that now, due to the high rush volume and phenomenal offensive line in Philly. We move on to Anthony Richardson. Now, with everything I'm about to say, monitor his injury, as he did go down late in the game against Jacksonville. We weren't sure what the full picture was going to be with Richardson, but the rushing upside was definitely something for fantasy owners to look forward to, and we got that 10 rushes for 40 yards and a tutty. What we may not have expected was for Richardson to show off the arm and clear 220 passing yards when odds makers had him in the ballpark of 190. Richardson tossed 3 separate passes for at least 20 yards, all completed. He accounted for 40 of the Colts' 65 rushing yards behind an offensive line that has been anything but consistent for them, and that continued into week 1. And he showed some poise, all things considered, for a rookie in his debut. When this team faced a deficit, he began throwing the ball down the field with effectiveness and finished the day 24 for 37 in the ballpark of a 65% completion rate, when that was a major concern coming out of his last year at Florida. For reference, Justin Fields did not attempt 37 passes until his 12th start. So keep that in mind when asking yourself how much you think this Colts team believes in Anthony Richardson. He also got on the same page as Indianapolis' number 1 receiver in Michael Pittman, and he kept his team in the game against the Jaguars unit that made it to the 2nd round of last year's playoffs. This could be a phenomenal sign of things to come for the dual threat quarterback. Let's move on to Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was high on my list before, and I have to say, I expect a veteran running back in this Green Bay offense to get plenty of touches, considering he's surrounded by an extremely young receiving core and essentially a rookie at quarterback in Jordan Love. But I've got to compliment Aaron Jones on doing more with less against the Bears. Only 2 catches for Aaron Jones since he exited the game early, but they went for 51 and 35 yards. Meanwhile, A.J. Dillon struggled to get across the line of scrimmage before seeing contact, as he just took 13 rushes for 19 yards on the day. Not the most efficient performance for him. Aaron Jones did grab his hamstring at the end of his 2nd touchdown of the day and ran immediately into the locker room, but he immediately came out stating that it shouldn't be a serious injury. Aaron Jones had 72 targets last season. That was the 2nd highest mark on the team, and I expect similar output with the receiving core being even more inexperienced than it was last year. Let's stay in that Packers-Bears matchup. We'll move on to Roschon Johnson. There was a general curiosity looming on how the pecking order of Chicago running backs would look, even though Khalil Herbert is listed as the primary option. Well, if we learned anything on Sunday, it's that even in what was a borderline blowout loss, running backs are still going to be an integral part of this offense. Roschon Johnson tied Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet for a team-high 7 targets, and some of those were in the final minutes. Justin Fields and this Bears offense, even when facing a growing deficit, did something that we saw a lot of last year. They went check down after check down after check down. Now, I know it's early, but 16 of the 37 Justin Fields throws were headed for the hands of a running back. That explains the 5.8 yards per attempt off the right hand of Fields. This team's comfort is in the backfield. They set a franchise record in rushing yards in 2022, but with an investment in the offensive line by getting Darnell Wright and the wide receiving core with the addition of DJ Moore, there was a promise to showcase Fields' arm more. As we learned in week 1, that doesn't mean leaning on running backs has to stop. At least as this team gets comfortable with doing so, expect a lot more dump-off passes regardless of the score. And Roschon Johnson took advantage of those opportunities. Last and certainly not least, Hayden Hurst. Now this one was a pleasant surprise, but historically it kind of makes sense. I'll explain that second part in a moment. For starters, Hayden Hurst did exactly what you need a tight end to do in order to succeed in a market this thin in elite talent. Either get upwards of a few targets or get in the end zone. Well, lucky for Hayden Hurst owners, he did both. Hurst drew in 7 targets, the 4th highest mark in the league and the most on the Panthers in week 1, and he hauled in the first touchdown pass of Bryce Young's career. So why did I say that all of this makes sense? I would say because if you look around the league's young quarterbacks the last few years, tight end has been a popular option across multiple instances. And in theory, it makes sense, right? Their route tree typically stays in between the hashes or close to it. So a young quarterback who doesn't always scan the entire field sees his tight end right away and is going to throw in his direction if he's relatively open. It's also just a bigger target. But we've got textbook examples. In Lamar Jackson's first year, Mark Andrews led the way in targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns. In Justin Fields' first full year, so last season, it was Cole Kmet who led across the board. For Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert was right up there with Devonta Smith. It's not always the case, but we don't need Hurst to explode. In a market where just 8 tight ends averaged more than 10 points per game in a standard PPR format last year, we just need some level of consistency and essentially a high floor. And I think that Hurst and Bryce Young got off on the right foot in week 1. Thank you so much for watching as always. Let me know what your thoughts on these picks are in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if this information helped you at all. Rolling into week 2's action, and we will see you in the next video.